Chapter 1. The Festive Invitation. The snow fell gently outside the frost-kissed windows of Hercule Poirot's London flat, each flake pirouetting to the ground like a dancer in a silent ballet. It was mid-December, and the city buzzed with the frenetic energy of Christmas preparations. Poirot, however, sat in his armchair, savouring the warmth of his meticulously arranged parlour, a cup of tisane steaming on the table beside him. His little grey cells, as he often called them, craved a puzzle, but the detective had resolved to enjoy a quiet holiday, until the post arrived. The envelope was thick, cream-coloured, and embossed with a crest, a stag entwined with holly. Poirot's moustache twitched as he sliced it open with a silver letter opener. The invitation within was penned in elegant script, requesting his presence at Harrington Manor for Christmas. The host, Sir Reginald Harrington, was a name Poirot vaguely recalled, a retired industrialist whose fortune stemmed from steel and railways. The letter was polite but insistent, hinting at a matter of discretion that might benefit from Poirot's presence. Intrigued, Poirot accepted, sensing the faint scent of mystery beneath the festive veneer. 3 days later, Poirot's train chugged through the snow-draped countryside, the fields of Kent transformed into a shimmering quilt of white. He adjusted his scarf, his sharp eyes scanning the compartment for anything amiss, a habit born of years solving crimes. The train deposited him at a small station where a chauffeur, bundled in a heavy coat, awaited with a sleek Rolls-Royce. "Monsieur Poirot, Sir Reginald sent me," the man said gruffly, ushering him into the car. Harrington Manor loomed against the twilight sky, its Tudor spires piercing the clouds like the jagged teeth of some ancient beast. Ivy clung to its stone walls, and rows of mullioned windows glowed with golden light, promising warmth within. As Poirot stepped from the car, a gust of wind sent snow swirling around his polished shoes. He straightened his hat, ensuring not a single hair of his moustache was out of place, and approached the oak doors, which swung open to reveal a butler with a face as stern as the winter night. "Welcome, Monsieur Poirot," the butler intoned, taking his coat. "Sir Reginald awaits you in the drawing-room." The interior of Harrington Manor was a study in opulence. Polished wood panelling gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and a massive Christmas tree dominated the hall, its branches heavy with baubles and tinsel. The air carried the scent of pine, mulled wine, and a faint trace of cigar smoke. Poirot's keen senses absorbed every detail. The scuff on a servant's shoe, the slightly crooked garland above the fireplace, each a potential clue in a game yet to begin. In the drawing-room, Sir Reginald Harrington stood by a roaring fire, a portly man in his 60s with a florid face and a booming laugh. His grey hair was thinning, but his eyes sparkled with the vigour of a much younger man. "Monsieur Poirot!" he exclaimed, striding forward to shake his hand. "An honour, truly. I've read of your exploits. Those little grey cells of yours are legendary." Poirot inclined his head, accepting the compliment with his usual modesty. "You are too kind, Sir Reginald. But tell me, why have you summoned Hercule Poirot to your charming manor?" Sir Reginald's smile faltered, a shadow crossing his face. "Oh, a trifling matter, really. Just thought a man of your talents might enjoy our little gathering. And well, one never knows when a sharp mind might come in handy." His vagueness only deepened Poirot's curiosity, but before he could press further, the room filled with other guests. First came Lady Eleanor Harrington, Sir Reginald's wife, a statuesque woman with silver hair and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her emerald gown rustled as she greeted Poirot, her manner polished but distant, "We're delighted you could join us, monsieur," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. Next was their son, Charles Harrington, a handsome man in his 30s with a restless energy. His tailored suit was impeccable, but his fingers drummed nervously on his glass of sherry. "Heard you solved the Abernathy case," Charles said, eyeing Poirot with a mix of admiration and suspicion. "Clever stuff." The daughter, Margaret, entered next, her auburn curls framing a face both delicate and defiant. She wore a crimson dress that clashed boldly with the room's decor, a silent rebellion against her mother's elegance. "Monsieur Poirot, I hope you're not here to spoil our fun," she teased, though her eyes darted to her father, as if seeking reassurance. The gathering grew with the arrival of two unexpected guests. Dr. Victor Langston, a gaunt physician with a perpetual frown, was introduced as Sir Reginald's old friend. His handshake was limp, his gaze evasive. "I'm here for the holiday, nothing more," he muttered, unprompted. The final guest was Miss Clara Beaumont, a young actress whose radiant beauty and theatrical laugh filled the room. Her presence seemed to unsettle Lady Eleanor, whose lips tightened imperceptibly. As mulled wine was served and carols played softly on a gramophone, Poirot observed the dynamics. Charles avoided his mother's gaze, Margaret whispered sharply to Clara, and Dr. Langston hovered near Sir Reginald, his eyes flitting to the door. The servants, too, moved with a quiet tension, their smiles strained. Poirot's instincts prickled. This was no ordinary Christmas gathering. Dinner was announced, and the party moved to a dining room adorned with holly and silver candelabras. The table groaned under platters of roast goose, mince pies, and a glistening plum pudding. Sir Reginald presided jovially, regaling them with tales of his business triumphs, but Poirot noted the forced laughter, the glances exchanged when they thought no one was watching. Over dessert, Sir Reginald raised a glass. "To family, friends, and festive secrets," he toasted, his eyes locking briefly with Poirot's. As the meal ended, Poirot retired to his guest room, a cosy chamber with a four-poster bed and a view of the snow-covered gardens. He sat by the fire, sipping cocoa, his mind sifting through impressions. The invitation, Sir Reginald's cryptic hint, the undercurrents of unease, something was afoot. Hercule Poirot, the master of order, sensed chaos lurking beneath the holiday cheer. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve, and with it the promise of gifts and perhaps a puzzle worthy of his little grey cells. He extinguished the lamp, the darkness broken only by the soft glow of snow outside. As he drifted to sleep, a single thought lingered. In a house full of secrets, the truth was the most dangerous gift of all. Chapter 2. Snowfall and Secrets. The snow fell heavier now, a relentless curtain that cloaked Harrington Manor in silence, save for the occasional creak of the old house settling under winter's weight. Hercule Poirot stood at his bedroom window, his sharp eyes tracing the flakes as they buried the gardens below. The isolation of the manor, cut off from the world by drifts and blocked roads, suited a detective of his caliber, a closed circle where secrets could not escape. Christmas Eve was mere hours away, and the air buzzed with anticipation, not all of it festive. Breakfast was served in a sunlit conservatory, its glass walls framing a world of white. The table was laden with kedgeree, toast, and steaming pots of tea, but Poirot's attention was on the guests. Sir Reginald at the head was jovial, though his laughter seemed forced, his eyes darting to his wife. Lady Eleanor presided with icy grace, her conversation limited to polite inquiries about the weather. Charles shoveled food mechanically, his jaw tight, while Margaret picked at her plate, her gaze flicking to Clara Beaumont, who chatted animatedly about her latest theatre role. Dr. Victor Langston, seated beside Poirot, was an enigma. His gaunt frame hunched over his tea, and his fingers trembled slightly as he stirred it. "Snow like this," he muttered, unprompted, "keeps everyone trapped. No one leaves, no one arrives." Poirot raised an eyebrow, noting the doctor's unease. Was it the weather or someone else that troubled him? The morning passed in a flurry of preparations. Servants bustled, hanging wreaths and polishing silver for the evening's festivities. Poirot, ever observant, wandered the manor, his polished shoes silent on the Persian rugs. In the drawing-room, he found Margaret arranging holly, her movements sharp with frustration. "Clara thinks she's the star of this house," she snapped when Poirot inquired about her mood. "Always performing, always stealing attention. Father indulges her, but I see through her." Her words carried the sting of jealousy, and Poirot filed them away, his moustache twitching with interest. In the library, Charles was poring over a ledger, his brow furrowed. He started when Poirot entered, slamming the book shut. "Just business matters," he said too quickly. "Nothing to concern you, monsieur." Poirot smiled benignly, but his grey cells were alert. The ledger's leather cover bore the initials R.H., Sir Reginald's, not Charles's. Was the son meddling in his father's affairs? Lunch brought the group together again, though the mood was strained. Clara, in a fur-trimmed dress, regaled them with tales of London stage, her laughter bright but her eyes calculating. Lady Eleanor's smile was a thin line, and when Clara mentioned a generous patron who funded her career, Sir Reginald coughed into his napkin, earning a sharp glance from his wife. Poirot sipped his wine, noting the undercurrents. Was Clara's presence more than festive charity? Her familiarity with Sir Reginald suggested a connection beyond mere acquaintance. As the afternoon waned, Poirot joined Sir Reginald in the study, where the industrialist was sorting through a stack of Christmas cards. "You've a fine family, Sir Reginald," Poirot said, probing gently, "yet I sense not all is harmony." Sir Reginald's hand paused, his jovial mask slipping. "Families, Monsieur Poirot, are like businesses, full of debts and rivalries, but nothing serious, I assure you." His tone lacked conviction, and Poirot's curiosity deepened. Why invite a detective if all was well? The snow continued to fall, and by dusk the manor felt like a world unto itself. Poirot observed the servants, noting their efficiency but also their unease. The butler, Mr. Grayson, was impeccable, yet his eyes darted nervously when Clara passed. A young maid, Lily, dropped a tray of ornaments when Charles brushed by her, her face flushing with more than embarrassment. Poirot's mind catalogued these details, each a thread in the tapestry of suspicion. Dinner was a grand affair, with roasted pheasant and a towering trifle, but the conversation was stilted. Dr. Langston excused himself early, claiming fatigue, though Poirot caught him lingering in the hallway, listening to the chatter from the dining room. Margaret and Clara exchanged barbed pleasantries, while Charles drank heavily, his eyes fixed on his father. Lady Eleanor, ever the hostess, steered the talk to neutral topics, but her hands gripped her napkin tightly. As the clock struck 10, the party moved to the drawing-room for carols. Clara's voice soared over the piano, but Poirot's attention was drawn to the window, where a flicker of movement caught his eye. A figure, bundled against the cold, trudged through the snow toward the manor. The doorbell rang, its chime cutting through the music. The butler hurried to answer, and moments later a stranger stood in the doorway, snow clinging to his coat. "Mr. Edward Vance," the butler announced, his voice tight. The man was in his 40s, with sharp features and a guarded expression. Sir Reginald paled, his glass trembling. "Edward, what brings you here?" he asked, his tone a mix of surprise and unease. Vance smiled thinly. "Business, Reginald, and a touch of holiday spirit." His eyes swept the room, lingering on each guest, and Poirot felt a chill unrelated to the winter air. This arrival was no coincidence. The evening wound down, but the atmosphere had shifted. Charles muttered an excuse and left. Margaret followed Clara with a glare, and Lady Eleanor retired with a headache. Poirot lingered, sipping brandy with Sir Reginald and Vance, who spoke in vague terms of old partnerships. Dr. Langston reappeared, his earlier fatigue gone, and joined the conversation, his questions oddly pointed. Poirot listened, his mind a whirl of connections. As he climbed the stairs to his room, the manor creaked around him, the snow muffling all but the secrets within. Poirot paused at a window, gazing at the endless white expanse. Edward Vance's arrival had stirred the pot, and the tensions among the Harringtons were palpable. Something was brewing, a storm not of snow, but of human passions. Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells, knew that Christmas Eve would bring more than gifts. It would bring revelations. He closed his door, the fire casting shadows on the walls. The manor was a stage, its players hiding their true roles. Tomorrow, Poirot sensed, the curtain would rise on a drama far darker than the carols suggested. Chapter 3. The Gift Under the Tree. The great hall of Harrington Manor glowed with the warmth of 100 candles, their flames dancing in the crystal chandelier above. The Christmas tree, a majestic fir adorned with glass baubles and velvet ribbons, stood as the centerpiece, its branches sagging under the weight of gifts wrapped in silks and satins. It was Christmas Eve, and the air hummed with anticipation, though Hercule Poirot sensed a current of unease beneath the festive cheer. He stood near the fireplace, his sharp eyes scanning the room, his moustache impeccably groomed despite the late hour. The guests gathered in their finery, the women in glittering gowns, and the men in tailored suits. Sir Reginald Harrington, resplendent in a velvet smoking jacket, clapped his hands to silence the chatter. "My friends, my family," he boomed, his ruddy face alight with enthusiasm. "Let us celebrate the season with the exchange of gifts. A tradition to warm the heart, eh?" His joviality rang hollow to Poirot, who noted the slight tremor in his host's hand as he gestured to the tree. Lady Eleanor, regal in sapphire silk, distributed the presents with a practised smile, though her eyes flicked nervously to her husband. Charles lounged by the piano, a glass of brandy in hand, his gaze distant. Margaret, in a gown of emerald green, hovered near the tree, her fingers twisting a strand of pearls. Clara Beaumont, radiant in stupid gold, laughed too loudly, drawing attention, while Dr. Victor Langston sat stiffly, his gaunt face unreadable. Edward Vance, the mysterious newcomer, leaned against a pillar, his sharp eyes missing nothing. The servants, including the butler Grayson and the maid Lily, lingered at the edges, their expressions guarded. Poirot, ever the observer, declined to participate, claiming his gift was the pleasure of their company. In truth, he preferred to watch, his little grey cells cataloguing every glance, every gesture. The gift exchange began with predictable offerings: a silk scarf for Lady Eleanor, a leather-bound book for Charles, a brooch for Margaret. Clara received a pair of pearl earrings, her delight theatrical as she thanked Sir Reginald with a kiss on the cheek that made Lady Eleanor's lips tighten. Dr. Langston unwrapped a bottle of rare whisky, his muttered thanks barely audible. Vance received a silver cigarette case, which he examined with a cryptic smile, murmuring, "How thoughtful, Reginald!" Then came Sir Reginald's turn. Lady Eleanor handed him a small, exquisitely wrapped box, its crimson paper tied with a gold ribbon. "From an anonymous friend," she said, her voice cool. The room fell silent as Sir Reginald tore open the wrapping, revealing a velvet-lined case. Inside gleamed an ornate silver letter opener, its handle engraved with intricate vines and a single sharp blade that caught the candlelight. A collective murmur rippled through the guests. Admiration, perhaps, but Poirot detected envy in Charles's narrowed eyes, and curiosity in Margaret's quick glance at Clara. "Remarkable craftsmanship," Sir Reginald said, turning the letter opener in his hands. "A fine addition to my collection, but who could have sent it?" He looked around, his smile faltering as no one claimed responsibility. Poirot noted the exchange of glances. Margaret's frown, Clara's coy smile, Vance's sudden stillness. The anonymity of the gift seemed to unsettle the room, like a discordant note in a carol. The exchange continued, but the mood had shifted. Charles, unwrapping a tie-pin, muttered about extravagant nonsense, his eyes flicking to his father's gift. Margaret's gift, a set of embroidered handkerchiefs, prompted a sharp comment about cheap sentimentality that made Lady Eleanor flinch. Clara, ever the performer, gushed over a fan from Margaret, though her enthusiasm seemed forced. Dr. Langston, clutching his whisky, stared at the letter opener still in Sir Reginald's hand, his fingers twitching as if resisting an urge to reach for it. Poirot sipped his mulled wine, his mind whirring. The letter opener was no ordinary gift. Its craftsmanship suggested expense, its anonymity purpose. Was it a gesture of affection, or something more sinister? He recalled Sir Reginald's cryptic remark about debts and rivalries, and wondered if the gift was a symbol of one such debt. As the evening progressed, the Ashur guests dispersed to various activities. Clara played a lively tune on the piano, drawing Charles and Vance into a half-hearted sing-along. Margaret retreated to a corner, flipping through a novel with evident disinterest. Lady Eleanor excused herself to oversee the servants, though Poirot caught her pausing at the door, her eyes on her husband. Sir Reginald, meanwhile, placed the letter opener on the mantel, where it gleamed like a silent sentinel. Poirot approached the tree, examining the remaining gifts. A small tag, half hidden among the ribbons, caught his eye. It bore no name, only a faint pencil mark, a symbol, perhaps, or a smudge. He tucked the observation away, his instincts prickling. The manor's opulence hid a web of tensions, and the letter opener was a thread in that web. Later, as the clock neared 11, the party reconvened for a toast. Sir Reginald raised his glass, the letter opener now tucked into his pocket. "To Christmas, and to secrets shared in good company," he declared, his eyes sweeping the room. Poirot noted the forced smiles. Charles's grimace, Margaret's pursed lips, Clara's arched brow. Dr. Langston drained his glass in one gulp, and Vance's toast was accompanied by a smirk that seemed to challenge Sir Reginald's cheer. The evening ended with carols, but the harmony was strained. Poirot lingered by the fire, watching as the guests retired one by one. Sir Reginald was the last to leave, pausing to admire his letter opener once more before ascending the stairs. Poirot followed, his steps silent on the thick carpet. The manor was quiet now, save for the howl of the wind outside and the soft creak of settling wood. In his room, Poirot sat by the window, the snow still falling in endless waves. The gift exchange had revealed more than presents. it had exposed fissures in the Harrington household. The letter opener, with its anonymous origin and gleaming blade, was no mere trinket. It was a catalyst, a spark in a house already smouldering with secrets. Poirot's little grey cells hummed with possibilities. Tomorrow was Christmas Day, but tonight something darker was unwrapping itself at Harrington Manor. He extinguished his lamp, the glow of the snow casting faint shadows. The stage was set, the players in place. Hercule Poirot knew that the next act would bring not just celebration, but revelation, and perhaps danger. Chapter 4. Midnight Merriment Turns Macabre. The clock in Harrington Manor's great hall chimed midnight, its deep toll resonating through the oak-panelled corridors. The Christmas Eve festivities had reached a crescendo, with laughter and clinking glasses spilling from the drawing-room where the guests lingered over brandy and mince pies. Hercule Poirot, ever vigilant, stood by a window, his sharp eyes catching the flicker of snowflakes in the moonlight. The merriment felt fragile, like a glass bauble teetering on a branch, and his instincts whispered of impending calamity. Sir Reginald had retired to his study an hour earlier, claiming a need to review some papers. "Business waits for no holiday," he had joked, patting the pocket where the silver letter opener rested. Poirot had noted his flushed cheeks and slightly unsteady gait. Too much brandy, perhaps, or something else. The detective's musings were interrupted by a piercing scream that cut through the carols like a blade. The sound came from the direction of the study. Poirot moved swiftly, his polished shoes clicking on the parquet floor, followed by a rush of guests and servants. The butler, Grayson, reached the study door first, his face pale as he fumbled with the handle. It was unlocked, and as the door swung open, a collective gasp filled the air. Sir Reginald Harrington lay slumped over his desk, his face contorted in a grimace of pain. The silver letter opener gleamed beside an open bottle of port, its cork half removed. A glass, tipped over, had spilled crimson liquid across papers strewn on the desk. The room smelled faintly of almonds, a scent that sent a chill through Poirot's spine. Poison. Lady Eleanor staggered back, clutching her pearls. "Reginald!" she cried, her voice breaking. Charles pushed past her, his hands shaking as he reached for his father, only to be stopped by Poirot's firm grip. "Do not touch, Monsieur Charles," Poirot said sharply. "We must preserve the scene." Margaret collapsed into a chair, sobbing hysterically, while Clara Beaumont stood frozen, her eyes wide but oddly calm. Dr. Victor Langston, his medical instincts kicking in, knelt beside the body, checking for a pulse. "He's gone," he said, his voice hollow. Edward Vance lingered at the doorway, his sharp features unreadable, though his fingers tightened around his cigarette case. Poirot took command, his presence a beacon of calm amid the chaos. "Monsieur Grayson, seal the entrances. No one leaves this house," he ordered. The butler nodded, hurrying off with a servant. Poirot turned to the group, his moustache twitching as he assessed their reactions. "This is no accident. Sir Reginald has been murdered, and the answer lies among us." The word murder hung heavy, silencing Margaret's sobs. Charles's face flushed with anger. "Murder! That's absurd! Who would—" He stopped, his eyes darting to the letter opener. Clara's hand fluttered to her throat, while Langston's gaze fixed on the spilled port. Vance lit a cigarette, the flare of his match casting shadows on his face. Lady Eleanor, regaining her composure, demanded, "Monsieur Poirot, what do you intend to do?" "To observe, to listen, to think," Poirot replied, his voice steady. The little grey cells, They will uncover the truth. But first, we must secure this room." He gestured to the study, noting the open window, its latch undone despite the freezing night. Snow had dusted the sill, but no footprints marked the floor beneath, a curious detail. Poirot examined the desk without touching it. The letter opener's blade was pristine, but its handle bore faint smudges, as if wiped hastily. The port bottle's label was smudged too, and the glass held a faint residue that shimmered oddly in the lamplight. "Poison, most likely," Poirot murmured, his mind racing. The almond-like scent suggested cyanide, but how had it been administered? The letter opener so prominently displayed seemed too obvious, yet its anonymity gnawed at him. He turned to Dr. Langston. "Monsieur, as a physician, what say you?" Langston hesitated, his gaunt face pale. "Cyanide, I'd wager, given the smell and his symptoms, convulsions, rapid death, but I'd need to examine further." Poirot nodded, noting the doctor's reluctance. Was it professional caution, or something more? The guests were ushered to the drawing-room, where the Christmas tree now seemed a mockery of the evening's tragedy. Poirot remained in the study, his eyes scanning every detail. A crumpled letter under a book, a half-burnt cigar in an ashtray, a single holly berry on the floor near the window. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. Back in the drawing-room, tension crackled like the logs in the fireplace. Charles paced, muttering about enemies in business. Margaret, her eyes red, accused Clara of bewitching father with her theatrics. Clara's composure cracked, her voice sharp as she retorted, "Jealousy doesn't suit you, Margaret." Lady Eleanor sat rigidly, her hands clasped, while Vance smoked in silence, his eyes tracking Poirot's every move. Langston fidgeted, his fingers twisting a handkerchief. Poirot addressed them, his tone measured. "Someone in this house gave Sir Reginald that letter-opener. Someone ensured it was more than a gift. I will ask questions, and I expect truth." His gaze swept the room, lingering on each face. Charles flinched. Margaret looked away. Clara's smile was brittle. Langston's hand stilled, and Vance exhaled a slow plume of smoke. The maid, Lily, hovered at the edge, her face tear-streaked. Poirot noted her trembling hands and made a mental note to speak with her later. Servants he knew saw more than they were seen. Grayson returned, confirming the manor was secure, though his own composure seemed strained. As the clock ticked past 1, Poirot dismissed the group to their rooms, warning them to remain vigilant. He lingered, his mind sifting through the night's events. The letter opener, the poison, the open window, each pointed to a calculated act. Sir Reginald's death was no impulse. It was a performance, staged with precision. But why now on Christmas Eve, and why with such a theatrical prop? Poirot returned to the study, closing the door. He stood by the desk, his fingers hovering over the letter opener. Its anonymity was no accident. It was a message, a taunt. The murderer was among them, hiding behind festive cheer. Hercule Poirot's little grey cells hummed with purpose. The snow outside might trap them, but it also trapped the killer. The game had begun, and Poirot would not rest until the truth was unwrapped. Chapter 5. Poirot's Little Grey Cells. Awaken, the morning after Sir Reginald's murder dawned bleak, the snow outside Harrington Manor piling higher, sealing the house in a cocoon of white. The great hall, once vibrant with Christmas cheer, now felt oppressive, the towering tree a silent witness to tragedy. Hercule Poirot stood in the study, his eyes tracing the scene where Sir Reginald had met his end. The spilled port, the silver letter opener, the faint almond scent lingering in the air. His little grey cells, as he called them, were fully awake, sifting through the chaos to find order. The household gathered in the dining room for a subdued breakfast, though few had an appetite. Lady Eleanor, pale but composed, sipped tea with trembling hands. Charles stared at his untouched plate, his jaw tight. Margaret's eyes were red from crying, her fingers shredding a napkin. Clara Beaumont, poised despite the circumstances, buttered her toast with deliberate care, while Dr. Victor Langston fidgeted, his gaunt face drawn. Edward Vance leaned back in his chair, his sharp gaze flitting between the others, a cigarette smouldering between his fingers. The servants moved like ghosts, their usual efficiency marred by fear. Poirot entered, his presence commanding attention. "Mes amis," he began, his voice calm but firm, "a crime has been committed, and the truth lies within this house. I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover it. I ask for your cooperation and your honesty." His moustache twitched as he scanned their faces, noting the flickers of unease. Charles's clenched fist, Margaret's sharp intake of breath, Clara's fleeting smile. He began his interviews in the library, a wood-panelled sanctuary lined with leather-bound tomes. First was Lady Eleanor, her sapphire shawl draped like armour. "I was in my room after the gift exchange," she said, her voice steady. "Reginald often worked late. I heard nothing until the scream." Poirot noted her composure, but also the faint tremor in her voice when she mentioned the letter opener. "Did you know its sender, madame?" he asked. She shook her head too quickly. "It was anonymous. A cruel jest, perhaps." Poirot let the silence linger, sensing her guardedness. Charles was next, his agitation palpable. "I was in the billiard room with Vance, smoking," he said, avoiding Poirot's eyes. "Father was fine when I last saw him. That letter opener, it's nonsense to think it's involved." Yet his fingers drummed nervously, and Poirot recalled the ledger Charles had been studying. "You were reviewing your father's business affairs, no?" Poirot pressed. Charles flushed. "Just curious. He was secretive lately." The evasion was a thread Poirot tucked away. Margaret entered, her auburn curls dishevelled. "I was in the drawing-room, reading," she said, her voice brittle. "Clara was there, preening as usual." Her disdain for the actress was clear, but when Poirot asked about the letter opener, she faltered. "It was beautiful, but sinister. I don't know why." Her eyes darted to the door, as if expecting an interruption. Poirot noted her volatility, a mix of grief and something sharper, guilt perhaps. Clara Beaumont glided in, her gold earrings catching the light. "I was singing carols until midnight," she said, her smile practised. "Then I retired. Poor Reginald." Her sympathy felt rehearsed, and Poirot probed further. "You knew Sir Reginald well, mademoiselle?" Clara's eyes flickered. "He was a patron of the arts, nothing more." Yet her familiarity with the family suggested otherwise, and Poirot marked her as one to watch. Dr. Langston was nervous, his hands twisting a pen. "I was in my room, reading medical journals," he claimed. "Cyanide, you say? It's fast, deadly, could have been in the port." His knowledge was useful, but his evasiveness intrigued Poirot. Why had he lingered in the hallway the previous night? "You seemed troubled, monsieur, during the festivities," Poirot said. Langston shrugged. "Just tired." The lie was thin, and Poirot's grey cells hummed. Edward Vance was the last, his cool demeanour unshaken. "I was with Charles, then alone in the conservatory," he said, exhaling smoke. "Reginald and I had business disagreements, but nothing fatal." His cryptic tone and sharp eyes suggested more, and Poirot recalled his late arrival. Your visit was unexpected, no? Poirot asked. Vance smiled thinly. Business doesn't keep to schedules. His vagueness was deliberate, a wall Poirot would need to breach. With interviews complete, Poirot returned to the study, now cordoned off by Grayson's vigilance. He examined the port bottle, noting a faint residue on its neck, as if wiped clean. The letter opener still on the desk bore no fingerprints, a meticulous touch. The spilled glass held traces of a crystalline substance, confirming cyanide. But how had it reached Sir Reginald? The bottle, the glass, or something else? Poirot's eyes fell on the letter opener again. Its blade was pristine, but the handle's engravings held a faint stickiness, barely perceptible. A delivery method, perhaps? He moved to the window, still unlatched. No footprints marred the snow outside, but a faint scratch on the sill suggested something. A tool, perhaps, had been used to open it. A distraction, or an escape route that was never used. Poirot's mind churned, piecing together fragments, the anonymous gift, the poisoned port, the family's tensions. In the hall, he encountered Lily, the maid, her eyes red. "Monsieur, I saw nothing, I swear," she said before he could ask. Her fear was genuine, but her haste to speak intrigued him. "You were near the study, no?" Poirot said gently. She nodded, trembling. "I brought the port from the cellar as Grayson asked. It was sealed." Poirot thanked her, noting her emphasis on the seal. Had it truly been intact? As noon approached, Poirot gathered his thoughts. The alibis were flimsy, riddled with gaps. Charles's business meddling, Margaret's jealousy, Clara's charm, Langston's nervousness, Vance's secrecy, each held a motive, however veiled. The letter opener remains the enigma, its anonymity a taunt. Was it merely a prop, or the key to the poison's delivery? The snow trapped them all, but it also trapped the truth. Poirot stood by the Christmas tree, its lights dimmed by the day's grim reality. The murderer had planned this act with care, weaving death into the festive tapestry. Hercule Poirot's little grey cells were alight, chasing the threads of deceit. The killer was close, their masks slipping with every question. The game was afoot, and Poirot would not rest until the puzzle was solved. Chapter 6. Whispers in the Library. The snow continued its relentless assault on Harrington Manor, cocooning the estate in a silence broken only by the crackle of fires and the murmur of suspicion. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, its shelves heavy with leather-bound volumes and the weight of secrets. The morning light filtered through leaded windows, casting shadows on the Persian rug where he paced, his little grey cells sifting through the fragments of the previous night's tragedy. Sir Reginald's murder was no impulsive act. It was a tapestry of calculation. And the library, Poirot sensed, held threads of the truth. The household was restless, the festive spirit extinguished by grief and fear. Breakfast had been a grim affair, with Lady Eleanor's icy composure fraying, Charles's temper flaring at a servant's clumsiness, and Margaret's eyes darting accusingly toward Clara Beaumont. Dr. Victor Langston had eaten little, his gaunt face etched with worry, while Edward Vance's calm detachment seemed to unsettle everyone. Poirot had excused himself early, drawn to the library where he suspected secrets lingered like dust between pages. He began by examining the desk where Charles had been seen with Sir Reginald's ledger. The drawer was locked, but a hairpin from his pocket, kept for such eventualities, yielded its contents. A bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. The handwriting was feminine, the tone intimate, addressed to "My dearest Ear R." Poirot's moustache twitched as he read phrases like "our stolen moments" and "the risk is worth it." The signature was simply C. Clara, perhaps, or another. The dates spanned several months, ending abruptly a year ago. A love affair then, but whose? Before he could ponder further, voices drifted through the slightly ajar door. Poirot slipped behind a curtain, his presence concealed as Margaret and Clara entered, their tones sharp with hostility. "You think you can charm your way into this family?" Margaret hissed, her auburn curls trembling with anger. "Father was blind to your schemes, but I'm not." Clara's laugh was low, mocking. "Jealousy doesn't suit you, Margaret. Sir Reginald was generous, nothing more. You're imagining conspiracies where there are none." Her voice held a practised ease, but Poirot caught a flicker of unease in her pause. Margaret scoffed. "Generous? That letter opener wasn't cheap. Who paid for it, Clara? One of your patrons?" The accusation hung in the air unanswered as Clara stormed out, leaving Margaret to slump into a chair, her face a mask of frustration. Poirot emerged, startling Margaret. "Mademoiselle, a word," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "You suspect Mademoiselle Beaumont of more than charm, no?" Margaret's eyes widened, then narrowed. "She's a gold digger, Monsieur Poirot. Father was funding her career, and Mother hated it. That letter opener, it's too extravagant for a stranger's gift." Poirot nodded, filing away her suspicion. The letter opener's anonymity gnawed at him, its cost suggesting intent beyond mere kindness. Next, Poirot sought out the butler, Grayson, in the pantry. The man's stern facade cracked under Poirot's questioning. "The letter opener arrived by post, sir, 2 days ago," Grayson admitted. "No sender's name, just the manner's address. I placed it under the tree as instructed." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Instructed by whom?" Grayson hesitated. "A note with the package, sir. It said to present it as an anonymous gift for Sir Reginald." The note, Grayson confessed, had been discarded, but its existence was a clue, a deliberate attempt to obscure the sender's identity. Poirot returned to the library, his mind churning. The letters suggested an affair, possibly with Clara, which could explain Lady Eleanor's froideur and Margaret's hostility. But the letter opener's delivery pointed to a wider conspiracy. He rifled through more papers, finding a ledger entry noting a substantial payment to E.V. Edward Vance, perhaps? The amount was staggering, hinting at blackmail or a debt Sir Reginald had kept hidden. As noon approached, Poirot overheard another exchange, this time in the corridor outside. Charles and Dr. Langston spoke in hushed tones, their words barely audible. "You knew about Father's plans, didn't you?" Charles snapped. "That deal could have ruined us." Langston's reply was strained. "I warned him, Charles. He wouldn't listen, but I had nothing to do with the—" He stopped as a floorboard creaked, and both men fell silent, retreating in opposite directions. Poirot's grey cells buzzed. A deal gone wrong? And why was Langston so defensive? Seeking more clues, Poirot approached the maid, Lily, who was polishing silver in the dining room. Her hands trembled as she recounted the night of the murder. "I brought the port to the study, monsieur, but I swear it was sealed," she said, her voice quivering. "I saw Mr. Vance near the cellar earlier, though. He seemed furtive." Poirot's interest piqued. Vance's late arrival and cryptic demeanour made him a figure of suspicion, and his possible connection to the ledger payment added weight to Lily's observation. Poirot returned to the study, where the silver letter opener still lay, its engravings catching the light. He examined it closely, noting a faint scratch on the handle, as if something had been scraped off. A monogram, perhaps. The cyanide Dr. Langston had confirmed was likely in the port, but the letter opener's prominence troubled Poirot. Was it a red herring, or had it played a role in delivering the poison? A theory formed. The handle's engravings could have concealed a residue, transferred to Sir Reginald's hand when he handled it, then ingested with the port. It was ingenious, but required proof. The afternoon brought a tense lunch, the guests avoiding each other's eyes. Lady Eleanor excused herself early, claiming a headache, but Poirot saw her linger near the study door, her expression unreadable. Charles drank heavily, his temper fraying, while Margaret glared at Clara, who maintained her composure with infuriating ease. Vance and Langston exchanged glances, their silence louder than words. Poirot retreated to the library once more, the letters and ledger entries swirling in his mind. An affair, a debt, a mysterious gift. The threads were converging, but the pattern remained elusive. The snow outside trapped them all, but it also trapped the killer's secrets. Hercule Poirot's little grey cells were alight, weaving the whispers into a tapestry of motive and opportunity. The truth was close, hidden in the shadows of Harrington Manor's festive facade. Chapter 7. The Alibi Puzzle. The snow continued to entomb Harrington Manor, its relentless fall sealing the estate in a white prison. Inside, the air was thick with suspicion, the festive decorations now a cruel irony against the backdrop of Sir Reginald's murder. Hercule Poirot stood in the great hall, his sharp eyes lingering on the Christmas tree, its lights dimmed by the morning's gloom. The silver letter opener, the poisoned port, the open window, each was a piece of the puzzle. But the alibis of the guests were the key to unlocking the truth. Poirot's little grey cells hummed, eager to unravel the tangled timelines of Christmas Eve. The household gathered reluctantly in the drawing-room, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. Lady Eleanor sat rigidly, her hands folded tightly, while Charles paced, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep or too much brandy. Margaret's fingers twisted her pearls, her expression volatile. Clara Beaumont maintained her theatrical poise, though her smile was strained. Dr. Victor Langston clutched a cup of tea, his gaunt face pale, and Edward Vance leaned against the mantel, his cigarette smoke curling like a question mark. The servants, Grayson and Lily, hovered at the edges, their presence almost invisible, yet heavy with unspoken knowledge. Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding. "Mes amis, the truth lies in the details of your movements on Christmas Eve. I will reconstruct the night, and I ask for precision. Lies, they will not serve you." His moustache twitched as he studied their reactions. Charles's scowl, Margaret's flinch, Clara's arched brow. He started with Charles, whose alibi was the billiard room with Vance. "We played until 11:30, Charles said, his tone defensive. "Then I went to my room." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, monsieur, the maid Lily saw you near the study at 11:45. How do you explain this?" Charles flushed, stammering. I was fetching a cigar from the hall, just passing by." His hesitation was a crack in his story, and Poirot noted it. Margaret claimed she was in the drawing-room reading until midnight. "Clara was there, playing the piano," she said, her voice sharp. "I didn't see father." Poirot recalled her earlier accusation about Clara and pressed, "You were not near the study, mademoiselle?" Margaret's eyes flickered. "No, I stayed put." Yet Grayson had mentioned seeing her in the corridor near the study door, a detail she omitted. Poirot's grey cells stirred, another discrepancy. Clara's alibi was straightforward. Carols until midnight, then bed. "I was with everyone," she said, her voice smooth. "No time for mischief." But Poirot remembered her brief absence during the carols, when she claimed to fetch a shawl. "How long were you gone, mademoiselle?" he asked. Clara smiled. "A moment, no more." Her confidence was too polished, and Poirot suspected she was concealing something. Dr. Langston reiterated his claim of reading in his room. "I heard the scream and came running," he said, his fingers trembling. Poirot recalled his lingering in the hallway the previous night. "You were seen near the drawing-room earlier, monsieur, listening. Why?" Langston's eyes darted. "I was restless, that's all." His evasiveness was a thread Poirot would pull later. Edward Vance's alibi matched Charles's for the billiard room, but he admitted to stepping into the conservatory afterward. "I needed air," he said, exhaling smoke. "Alone?" Poirot asked, noting Vance's earlier furtiveness near the cellar, as Lily had mentioned. "Quite alone," Vance replied, his smile cryptic. Poirot sensed a lie, but Vance's cool demeanour offered no easy leverage. The most puzzling absence was Lily's. The maid claimed she was in the kitchen, cleaning after delivering the port. Yet no one could confirm her presence between 11 and midnight, the critical hour. When Poirot questioned her, she fidgeted, her eyes downcast. "I was tidying, monsieur. I didn't see anything." Her fear was palpable, and Poirot wondered if she was Choum, protecting someone, or herself. Returning to the study, Poirot re-examined the crime scene. The silver letter opener still on the desk drew his attention. He donned gloves and lifted it, inspecting the handle under a magnifying glass he carried for such purposes. The engravings revealed a faint residue, barely visible, a sticky film, not unlike the cyanide residue in the port glass. His theory solidified. The poison had been applied to the handle, transferred to Sir Reginald's hand when he handled it, then ingested when he drank. It was ingenious, requiring only a touch to set the trap. But how had the poison reached the letter opener? Poirot recalled Grayson's account of its anonymous delivery. The package had arrived sealed, but who had access before it was placed under the tree? He examined the desk again, finding a scrap of wrapping paper tucked beneath a blotter. It bore a faint watermark, a crest, similar to the one on Sir Reginald's stationery, but with a subtle difference. A crossed quill and dagger. A clue to the sender, perhaps. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a commotion in the hall. Charles and Margaret were arguing, their voices carrying. "You were always snooping in father's papers," Margaret snapped. "What were you hiding?" Charles retorted, "You're one to talk, always fawning over Clara's scraps." Poirot listened, noting their mutual suspicion. Their alibis were shaky, and their motives, greed, jealousy, were becoming clearer. He sought out Lady Eleanor, finding her in the conservatory, staring at the snow. "Madame, you said you were in your room, but a servant saw you near the study door," Poirot said gently. Her eyes widened, then softened. "I went to check on Reginald. He was alive, I swear." Her voice cracked, and Poirot believed her grief, but not her full honesty. As evening fell, the manor's isolation weighed heavier. Poirot gathered his notes, the alibis forming a fractured mosaic. Charles's cigar excuse, Margaret's corridor sighting, Clara's shawl, Langston's eavesdropping, Vance's solitude, Lily's absence. Each was a piece, but the picture was incomplete. The letter opener's residue was a breakthrough, but the crest on the wrapping paper hinted at a deeper connection, perhaps to the family itself. The murderer was clever, using the festive chaos to mask their act. But Hercule Poirot was cleverer. The snow might trap them, but it also trapped the truth. His little grey cells were piecing together the puzzle, and the killer's mask was slipping with every discrepancy uncovered. Chapter 8. Twists of the Tinsel. The snow continued to entomb Harrington Manor, its relentless fall muffling the world outside, while amplifying the dread within. Christmas Day had dawned, but the festive spirit was a distant memory, replaced by a palpable fear that clung to the oak-panelled halls. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing-room, his sharp eyes scanning the guests whose faces were drawn with suspicion and exhaustion. The murder of Sir Reginald had cracked the facade of the holiday, and now Poirot sensed the killer was growing bolder. The morning began with a strained breakfast, the clink of cutlery the only sound as the household avoided each other's gazes. Lady Eleanor's composure was fraying, her hands trembling as she poured tea. Charles's temper simmered, his eyes darting to Edward Vance, who smoked calmly by the window. Margaret clutched a handkerchief, her auburn curls limp with worry. Clara Beaumont, ever the actress, maintained a fragile poise, though her laughter was gone. Dr. Victor Langston's gaunt face was paler than usual, his fingers twisting a napkin. The servants, Grayson and Lily, moved silently, their fear evident in their hurried steps. Poirot was about to resume his questioning when a choked gasp shattered the silence. Clara staggered from her chair, clutching her throat, her teacup clattering to the floor. "Poison!" she rasped, her face contorted. Dr. Langston sprang into action, forcing her to drink water and checking her pulse. "It's not fatal," he said, his voice tight. "A small dose, perhaps ipecac meant to scare." Clara, trembling but alive, was escorted to her room, her eyes wide with terror. The room erupted in whispers, and Poirot's little grey cells surged into overdrive. The killer was still among them, their audacity growing. Poirot ordered the teacup secured, noting a faint bitter residue in the dregs, similar to the almond-like scent of Sir Reginald's cyanide. The attempt on Clara suggested she was either a target or a distraction, and Poirot leaned toward the latter. Her survival was no accident. The killer wanted chaos, not another corpse. But why Clara? Her connection to Sir Reginald, hinted at in the letters, made her a threat or a scapegoat. Returning to the study, Poirot intensified his search. The silver letter opener, now under lock and key, haunted his thoughts. Its sticky residue, confirmed as cyanide by Langston's reluctant analysis, was the murder weapon's genius. A poison applied to the handle, transferred to Sir Reginald's hand, then ingested with his port. But who had the knowledge and opportunity to craft such a trap? Poirot rifled through Sir Reginald's desk, finding a hidden compartment beneath a false drawer. Inside were forged documents, a will dated a month ago, naming Clara as a significant beneficiary, and a contract transferring a substantial share of Harrington Industries to E.V., Edward Vance. The forgeries were clumsy, the signatures slightly off, but their implications were explosive. The will favoured Clara over Charles and Margaret, fueling their resentment. The contract suggested Vance had leverage over Sir Reginald, perhaps tied to the business disagreements he'd mentioned. Poirot's mind flashed to the crest on the wrapping paper, a quill and dagger, subtly different from the Harrington crest. A visit to the library revealed an old family portrait, its frame bearing the same quill and dagger emblem. The caption read, "Harrington and Vance, 1895. A partnership, long buried, now resurfaced. Poirot sought out Lady Eleanor, finding her in the conservatory, her face etched with grief. "Madame, you knew of your husband's past with Monsieur Vance, non?" he asked gently. Her eyes widened, then softened. They were partners once, in the early days of the business. Reginald bought him out, but there was bad blood. She hesitated, then added, Edward returned last year, demanding repayment. Reginald refused. Poirot nodded, the pieces aligning. Vance's arrival was no coincidence. It was a reckoning. Next, Poirot confronted Charles in the billiard room. You knew of the forged will, monsieur? Charles's face flushed. I found it last week. Father was furious, said it wasn't his doing. I thought Clara was behind it. His anger was genuine, but his earlier evasiveness about the ledger suggested he'd been digging for more than just curiosity. Had he suspected a larger scheme? Margaret, when questioned, was volatile. Clara's a parasite, she spat. That will, it's a lie. Father would never favour her. Her jealousy was a motive, but her shaky alibi near the study door gnawed at Poirot. Had she seen something, or done something? Dr. Langston, cornered in the dining room, admitted to prescribing ipecac for Sir Reginald's indigestion months ago. It's common, he said defensively. Anyone could have taken it from the medicine cabinet. His knowledge of poisons and his nervous demeanour made him a suspect, but his fear seemed more like that of a witness than a culprit. Vance was the last, his cool facade unshaken. The contract? A fabrication, he said, exhaling smoke. Reginald owed me, but I didn't need to kill him for it. His denial was smooth, but Poirot recalled Lily's sighting of him near the cellar, where the port, and perhaps the ipecac, had been stored. The maid Lily, trembling under Poirot's gentle questioning, admitted to seeing Clara near the study before midnight, adjusting her shawl. She looked sneaky, Lily whispered, but I didn't want to say for fear of trouble. Poirot thanked her, his mind racing. Clara's brief absence during the carols, the forged will, the attempt on her life. Was she a victim or a mastermind? As evening fell, the manor's isolation tightened its grip. The forged documents and the quill and dagger crest pointed to a scandal rooted in the Harrington-Vance partnership, perhaps a betrayal that had festered for decades. The attempt on Clara was a bold move, meant to divert suspicion or silence a threat. The silver letter opener, with its poisoned handle, was the killer's masterpiece, but the forged will and contract were the motive's heart. Poirot stood by the Christmas tree, its tinsel twisted like the lies he was unravelling. The killer was desperate, their second act a sign of panic. Hercule Poirot's little grey cells were closing in, the truth glinting like a bauble in the dark. The next move would be decisive, and Poirot was ready to pull the final thread. Chapter 9. The Gathering Storm. The snow had ceased its relentless assault on Harrington Manor, but the silence outside only deepened the storm brewing within. The drawing-room, once aglow with Christmas cheer, now felt like a courtroom, its chandelier casting stark shadows on the gathered faces. Hercule Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small frame commanding the room, his moustache a beacon of calm amid the chaos. The guests sat in a tense semicircle. Lady Eleanor, her hands clasped tightly. Charles, his face flushed with anger. Margaret, her eyes darting nervously. Clara Beaumont, pale but composed after her poisoning scare. Dr. Victor Langston, his gaunt features taut, and Edward Vance, smoking with a detached air. The butler Grayson and maid Lily stood at the edges, their presence heavy with unspoken fears. Poirot's voice cut through the silence, precise and deliberate. Mes amis, a murderer walks among us, hidden behind the tinsel of Christmas. Sir Reginald was killed with cunning, and Mademoiselle Clara was nearly a second victim. But Hercule Poirot sees through the lies. Tonight, we uncover the truth. He held up the silver letter opener, now sealed in a cloth, its gleam dulled by its deadly secret. This was the instrument of death, he began. Its handle, coated with cyanide, poisoned Sir Reginald when he handled it and drank his port. A clever trap, no? But who set it? The room stirred. Charles shifted uncomfortably. Margaret's breath caught. Clara's eyes narrowed. Poirot turned to the forged documents, producing the will and contract from his pocket. These papers reveal motives. A will favouring Mademoiselle Clara, cutting out Monsieur Charles and Mademoiselle Margaret. A contract granting Monsieur Vance a share of Harrington Industries. Both are forgeries, but they point to greed and betrayal. Charles leapt to his feet. Clara's behind it! She wormed her way into father's favour. Clara's voice was sharp. Lies! I knew nothing of any will. Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. The forgeries are but one thread. The quill and dagger crest on the letter opener's wrapping paper. It is not the Harrington crest, but that of an old partnership. Monsieur Vance, you and Sir Reginald were allies once, were you not? Vance's cigarette paused mid-air, his eyes narrowing. Ancient history, Poirot. Reginald cheated me out of my share. I moved on. Yet you returned, Poirot pressed, demanding repayment. And the ledger shows payments to Evie. You, monsieur? Vance's smile was thin. Business, nothing more. Poirot's grey cells noted the evasion, but he pivoted to another thread. Madame Eleanor, you knew of this past. Why did you not speak? Lady Eleanor's lips trembled. It was a painful memory. Reginald swore it was settled. Poirot turned to the alibis, unravelling their inconsistencies. Monsieur Charles, you were not in the billiard-room as claimed, but near the study, seen by Lily. Mademoiselle Margaret, you were in the corridor, not the drawing-room. Mademoiselle Clara, your shawl absence was longer than a moment. Dr. Langston, you lingered in the hallway, listening, and Monsieur Vance, you were near the cellar where the port, and perhaps the ipecac, was stored. Each accusation landed like a stone, stirring gasps and denials. Margaret's voice broke. I was checking on father, that's all, Charles snapped. I told you, I wanted a cigar. Clara's eyes flashed. I needed air, not a conspiracy. Langston stammered. I was restless, nothing more. Vance exhaled smoke, silent but watchful. Poirot let their protests hang, his gaze piercing. He produced the scrap of wrapping paper, its quill and dagger crest glinting in the firelight. This crest ties the letter opener to the old partnership and to a scandal. Sir Reginald's wealth was built on betraying Monsieur Vance, was it not? A betrayal that festered, perhaps fueling a desire for revenge. Vance's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Poirot shifted to Clara's poisoning. The ipecac in Mademoiselle Clara's tea was no accident, but a misdirection. The killer wished to cast suspicion on her, or to silence her knowledge of the forged will. Yet her survival suggests calculation, not intent to kill. Clara's hand fluttered to her throat, her composure cracking. I'm no murderer, she whispered. Poirot's eyes swept the room. The killer is clever, using the festive chaos to mask their act. The letter opener was sent anonymously, its poison applied with precision. The forgeries were planted to sow discord. But one detail betrays you. He paused, letting the tension build. The cyanide residue on the letter opener's handle was wiped, but not perfectly. A faint fingerprint remains, too small for a man's hand. The room froze. Lady Eleanor's hands clenched. Margaret gasped, and Clara's face paled further. Poirot continued. The maid Lily saw someone near the study, adjusting their shawl. The same shawl, perhaps, used to wipe the handle. He turned to Lily, who trembled at the door. Mademoiselle, you know more than you say, no? Lily's eyes filled with tears. I saw Miss Clara, but I didn't want to accuse. Clara stood, her voice sharp. "I handled the letter opener to admire it, nothing more." Poirot nodded, but his eyes gleamed. "And yet, the fingerprint is not yours. It is too delicate, too precise." He turned to Margaret, whose face drained of colour. "Mademoiselle Margaret, your hatred for Clara was no secret. Did you see an opportunity to rid yourself of both her and your father's favour?" Margaret sobbed, shaking her head. "I didn't, I swear." Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind was relentless. The fingerprint, the crest, the forgeries, all pointed to a woman's touch, but the motive was still a shadow. Was it Margaret's jealousy, Lady Eleanor's wounded pride, or another's hidden grudge? As accusations swirled, Poirot stepped back, letting the storm rage. The killer's misdirection was unravelling, their careful plan fraying under his scrutiny. The truth was near, a spark waiting to ignite. Hercule Poirot's little grey cells were poised for the final revelation, ready to expose the heart of the Christmas murder. Chapter 10. Resolution by the Fireside. The fire in Harrington Manor's drawing-room crackled, casting a warm glow that belied the chill of suspicion gripping the room. The snow outside had ceased, leaving the estate in a hushed stillness, as if the world held its breath for Hercule Poirot's final act. The guests sat in a tense circle. Lady Eleanor, her face a mask of restraint. Charles, his hands clenched. Margaret, her eyes red with fear. Clara Beaumont, pale but defiant. Dr. Victor Langston, his gaunt frame rigid, and Edward Vance, his cigarette smoke curling like a spectre. The butler Grayson and maid Lily stood by the door, their faces pale. Poirot stood before the Christmas tree, its tinsel glinting like the truth he was about to unveil. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice steady, "a murderer has hidden among us, weaving a tapestry of deceit with the silver letter opener as its deadly thread. Tonight, Hercule Poirot will reveal the killer, their motive, and their method." His moustache twitched, his eyes sweeping the room, noting every flinch and glance. He held up the letter opener, its silver gleaming in the firelight. This was no mere gift. Its handle, engraved with intricate vines, concealed cyanide in a thin dissolvable film. When Sir Reginald handled it, the poison transferred to his fingers, then to his port glass, ensuring his death. A method most ingenious, requiring only a touch. The room stirred. Charles's jaw tightened. Margaret gasped. Clara's hand fluttered to her throat. Poirot turned to the forged documents. The will favouring Mademoiselle Clara and the contract for Monsieur Vance were distractions meant to sow discord. But the quill and dagger crest on the wrapping paper, it is the key. It belongs not to the Harringtons alone, but to a partnership betrayed long ago. He faced Edward Vance. "Monsieur, you and Sir Reginald built your fortunes together until he cheated you out of your share. You returned, seeking justice, non?" Vance's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. "He owed me, Poirot, but I didn't kill him." Poirot smiled thinly. "No, you did not. Your motive was clear, but your hands are clean, almost." He pivoted to the alibis, unravelling their flaws. "Monsieur Charles, you were near the study, not fetching a cigar. Mademoiselle, Margaret, you were in the corridor, not reading. Mademoiselle Clara, your shawl absence was a lie. Dr. Langston, you eavesdropped, seeking answers. But one person's absence is most telling." He turned to Lily, the maid, who trembled under his gaze. "Mademoiselle Lily, you were not in the kitchen during the critical hour. Where were you?" Her eyes filled with tears. I was in the cellar, hiding. I was scared." Poirot's voice softened. "Scared of what? Or whom? Lily's gaze darted to Lady Eleanor, then away. The room held its breath. Poirot stepped forward, his voice rising. The killer is not a man but a woman, one whose pride was wounded, whose secrets were threatened. Lady Eleanor, you knew of your husband's affair with Mademoiselle Clara, confirmed by the letters signed C. You knew of his past betrayal of Vance, which could ruin your family's legacy. And you knew of the forged will, which you believed Clara had orchestrated. Lady Eleanor's face paled, her hands gripping her shawl. "That's absurd, monsieur!" Poirot raised a hand. "Non, madame. The fingerprint on the letter opener, too small for a man's hand, matches yours. The quill and dagger crest. It was your family's before you married Reginald. Used to mark the anonymous gift. You sent the letter opener, coated with cyanide from Dr. Langston's medical supplies, which you accessed as his friend. The room erupted. Charles shouted. Margaret sobbed. Clara gasped. Poirot continued, relentless. You applied the poison in a dissolvable film, knowing Reginald would handle the gift and drink his port. The open window was a ruse to suggest an outsider. And the ipecac in Clara's tea, a warning to silence her or to cast suspicion elsewhere. Lady Eleanor stood, her voice trembling but defiant. "You have no proof!" Poirot produced the wrapping paper's crest, its match to her family's seal undeniable. "The letters, madame, reveal your fear of exposure. Reginald's affair and Vance's demands threatened your position. You acted to protect your legacy, but you underestimated Hercule Poirot." She collapsed into her chair, her composure shattered. "He betrayed me," she whispered. "Clara was a threat, and Vance would have ruined us. I had no choice." The confession hung heavy, the room silent but for the fire's crackle. Charles stared, stunned. Margaret wept. Clara's face softened with pity. Vance exhaled smoke, his expression unreadable. Langston's head bowed, as if relieved the truth was out. Poirot's voice softened. "The little grey cells, they see what others miss. The poison, the crest, the lies, they all pointed to you, madame. Justice will now take its course." He signalled Grayson, who nodded solemnly, ready to summon the authorities once the snow cleared. As the guests dispersed, the manor felt lighter. The weight of deception lifted. Poirot stood by the fire, his work complete. The sure Christmas murder, woven into the festive chaos, was unravelled by his meticulous mind. The snow outside sparkled under the moon, a symbol of clarity restored. Hercule Poirot, the master of order, had brought truth to Harrington Manor, proving once again that no secret could hide from his little grey